Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform and our ongoing health series through our OperationFreedomHealth.com website. It is my honor to welcome back my very dear friend, Dr. Peter Glidden, who is one of the top naturopathic physicians, not just in our country, but the world. In addition to being an incredible clinician, he is also an outstanding researcher and an outstanding author. His two books should be the foundation of your library. They are of ours. Everybody is sick, and I know why. An attempt to cure with holistic medicine. Today we are going to be discussing salt, an essential nutrient. For years, decades, we have been told that salt is bad for you. You should limit all salt intake. In fact, even if you don't have cardiovascular issues, you should limit salt in your diet. Now understand. When Peter and I do these presentations, and we've done now dozens and dozens of these, and they're available at davejana.com, operationfreedomhealth.com, and this YouTube channel. Big pharma, big medicine, AMA, big insurance, they don't like it that we do these because we dispel a lot of the propaganda which has been spewed through the bought-off lamestream fake media, which is part of the globalist syndicate of which big pharma and big medicine and big insurance are all part of. They don't like it that we do these eye-opening presentations. This one is on salt, an essential nutrient. My friend, Dr. Peter Glidden. Peter, welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Dave. And you know, all of this conversation begs the question, well, who made the CDC king?
Right.
Who made the FDA king?
Yeah, right.
Why do they get to say what's what?
Well, that would be the Rockefellers and all the other globalist dweebs.
It's unbelievable.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, the Romans apparently were smarter than we were. Because the roots of the word salary come from salt, because Roman soldiers were paid in salt. That's how important it was. Really, really super important nutrient. Lots of misinformation about it, all of which, 100% of which, has been promoted by the pharmaceutical industry, even though in the 1950s, I think it was 57 or 58, Harvard University published a study. There is no relationship between salt and high blood pressure. None, zero, doesn't exist. And a couple of years ago, people at Tufts, I believe, did a similar thing, came to the same conclusion. Salt is an extremely important nutrient for the human body. There is no reason for anybody to limit their intake of salt. It's just a myth. Now, think it through. Well, why would something like this be promoted? Why would this be propagandized? Well, because it's super important. And when you limit your intake of salt, the first thing to be affected is your stomach acid. Because salt is sodium chloride, NaCl. Your body needs the chloride in salt to make HCl, which is hydrochloric acid, which is one of the main constituents of stomach juice, digestive juice. So if your diet is restricted in sodium chloride, salt, your body doesn't have the raw materials to make hydrochloric acid, main part of your stomach acid. So your stomach acid becomes very, very weak. And that leads to two things. Number one, heartburn, which fuels the pharmaceutical industry, proton pump inhibitors and antacids, especially since antacids went over the counter like 7 or 8 years ago. I think antacids right now are either the number 3 or the number 4 most sold drug in the world. In the world, it's giant money. All because don't use salt, don't use salt, don't use salt. And also, I mean, it's not rocket science. If your stomach acid is weak instead of strong, how good do you think it's going to be at digesting nutrients out of your food?
It's not.
It's not.
Now, Pete, wait. Now, here's what the dogma is. The reason why you have heartburn is because your stomach acid is not too weak. It's too strong.
Yeah, it would make sense to think that.
Right.
Because, there's too much acid in there and it's coming up. But number one, what's the mechanism? It's really, really easy for the body to produce not enough of something.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really hard for the body to overproduce things. They can do it, but it's really hard. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, illnesses, chronic diseases that are related to the overproduction of something, and nothing's really coming to me. It's not easy to do that, but it's really easy for the body to underproduce things. So, but, this is like any other cultural myth. It has become reality by consensus, and people just don't think it through. They just accept it as rote without really even thinking about it. Like, fascism, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Right.
I don't think so.
Right.
Got to think that one through, and you'll come to an alternate conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same here. So here we are in the middle of the myth, which is making the pharmaceutical industry rich on two fronts, because number one, it promotes the overuse of antacids and proton pump inhibitors. And number two, it lays the foundation for the genesis of chronic disease.
Right. Because the nutrients can't be absorbed in what you're eating or drinking.
And every chronic disease is directly or indirectly related to nutrient deficiencies, period.
Mm-hmm.
So, you might be eating 3 square organic meals a day. You just eat Kobe beef, right? Mm. Best food on the planet, right? All day long, you're still going to be nutritionally deficient because, number one, there's not enough nutrients in the food to begin with. And now, number two, because your stomach acid is weak, because you don't have enough salt in your diet, you aren't able to pull the raw materials that you need out. It's a perfect freaking storm for the genesis of chronic disease and the promotion of the pharmaceutical method. Quite frankly, it was brilliant, whoever thought it up.
Pete, briefly back to the heartburn issue. You taught me this years ago, that if the stomach acid is too weak, the sphincter at the bottom of the esophagus that goes into the stomach, if the acid is too weak, it actually opens up more, which allows what's in the stomach to spill, if you will, come upwards. However, if the acid is strong, the sphincter clamps down harder, and if it clamps down harder, you don't get that reflex, that burning and, if you will, heartburn issue.
Bada bing, bada boom. So there's a negative feedback reaction in the stomach.
Right.
When food drops into it, pressure receptors are stimulated, and the body secretes gastrin, which is a hormone.
Mm-hmm.
Gastrin levels build up to a certain level, and when gastrin levels get high enough, that stimulates the production of hydrochloric acid. Mm-hmm. And then there's a couple of other steps as well. Mm-hmm. But this is the most important one for heartburn. So when everything's right, gastrin builds up, hydrochloric acid is secreted, and that gets into a healthy level, and the sphincter at the top of the stomach closes. And gastrin production is cut off because it's a negative feedback with hydrochloric acid. When hydrochloric acid reaches a certain level, gastrin stops being secreted. Mm-hmm. But if your body doesn't have salt or calcium that it also needs to pump the hydrochloric acid into the stomach, mm-hmm. what's going to happen is you're going to swallow food. The pressure receptors are stimulated. Gastrin builds up. Body produces a little hydrochloric acid, but not nearly enough. And so the gastrin doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. It keeps building up. And it's the presence of too much gastrin in the stomach, mm-hmm. because the signal to stop producing it was not there, mm-hmm. that opens the sphincter.
Yeah. And
too much gastrin opens it up, and you get heartburn because there is some weak stomach acid in there. Gastrin also is acidic. So it's the reverse of what everybody has been taught. It's not just a little bit off. It's 180 degrees opposite of what everybody's been taught. 180 degrees.
And the beneficiaries are Big Pharma.
Twice. And one is easy to understand with the antacid proton pump thing, but right. The other is much more insidious, mm-hmm. because there are very few physicians alive today, mm-hmm. who have any working understanding, any clinical experience with the relationship between nutrient deficiencies and chronic disease. I mean, scurvy is the most famous nutrient deficiency and rickets, right? Rickets is a vitamin D like David deficiency.
Scurvy, vitamin C.
Scurvy, vitamin C. That's why English sailors were called limeys, right? Because they had barrels of limes on their warships. They didn't know anything about vitamin C, but they knew that if their sailors ate limes every day, they didn't get sick.
Right.
So here we are, in the middle of the pharmaceutical model, with all of this misinformation all of the time, and by all of the time, I mean all of the time.
24/7.
Even though, we're not blowing smoke here. This is the relationship between salt and high blood pressure has been proven to be a myth twice. We've published research from very prestigious medical schools, but it's pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
So, Pete, our listeners, some of our listeners, let's say they have hypertension, high blood pressure. They go to their doc, and their doc says, well, I think one way you can get control of your high blood pressure is reduce your salt intake. What should our listeners say to their doc?
They should say, you need to do more research. You need to be more vigorous academically, because the research clearly shows that there is no relationship between excessive salt intake and high blood pressure. It doesn't exist. It's a medical myth. And I'd like you to prove to me that there is a correlation. I'd like you to prove it to me. Show me the research that says it. And they won't be able to, because it doesn't exist. It's a cultural myth. It's like your doctor telling you that the earth is flat. Well, okay, prove it.
Right. So some of our listeners, let's say, have heart disease. Okay? And they go to their doc, and their doc says, well, you need to exercise more. And, okay, fair enough. And you need to watch your diet. You need to change your diet. For example, you need to cut your salt intake because you have heart issues.
First thing that I would do is ask your doctor, can you please tell me what would define a vitamin? What's a vitamin? Tell me, what's a vitamin? Make that definition for me. What's a vitamin? I'd like to know. Won't be able to, because nobody has any working knowledge of definitions of this kind, but they're unhesitant to give information about stuff that they have no training, no experience, and quite frankly, no appreciation with.
Other than they were told this is right.
Everybody's afraid of their doctor.
Yeah.
Nobody questions.
Right.
That's why when I think 5 or 6 years out of medical school, I'm a naive guy, and I wear my heart on my sleeve a lot, and I think everybody has good intentions. Thank you very much. Welcome to the 21st century. They don't. I found out that there's a whole industry of liaisons between patients and doctors. It's a whole industry of people that act as go-betweens between the patient and the doctor. Why? Because patients are intimidated by their doctors, and they don't know to ask the correct questions. And also, I think this was published a year and a half ago, and I think it was USA Today. Over 70-something% of the time, when people go to a medical doctor for a diagnosis, and then a day later they go to a different medical doctor, they get a completely different diagnosis. Over 70% of the time, it's a second opinion gives a different opinion.
It's huge.
So what does this mean about science and the scientific method? It means it's out the window. And most physicians pay way more time paying attention to what the pharmaceutical rep says,
right,
than to actually doing the research. Now, to be fair, the amount of information that's pumped out by the research industry, it's impossible for any human being to stay current with that. You can't.
Especially when the government is putting ever some burdensome paperwork restrictions and mandates on providers. And I believe that's one of the ulterior motives of this. Not only control, but to get them going this way so they can't ask the questions about, now wait a minute, I was told salt intake is bad for folks that have hypertension. I'm just going to look up some studies on that, and I'm going to just see exactly what that shows. But truly, providers are so busy. I'm not trying to make excuses, but it's true. They're so busy trying to hit this, and this latest mandate that they have to do, that there's no time for something that docs 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago had the time to do.
And I think, if I remember correctly, we were talking after one of our broadcasts a couple weeks ago, and you told me that the hospital that you retired from, you had spoken to a couple of your colleagues who were still working there.
Yeah.
And they told you that the rules about how much time you could spend with patients were so egregious that you wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said they said, Dave, you wouldn't have lasted a week.
Because what's the mandate now? The doctor can't spend more than, 7 minutes with a patient?
It's variable, Pete. When I talk to my colleagues around the country, I mean, some of them, depending on who they're working for, that's another issue. Private practice is essentially, it's extinct. And docs are employed by hospitals, and they're employed by huge physician groups.
Right.
And these huge physician groups that are run by, in many cases, not all, but many cases, bean counters who really have no functional medical knowledge.
Right.
And hospitals, and let's face it, the vast majority of hospitals, there are some exceptions, are run by bean counters who have no functional medical knowledge. They start putting restrictions. Well, you're not seeing enough. You're not seeing enough patients. You're not seeing where our requirement is. You need to see 8 to 9 patients an hour, and you're seeing 6 or 7. That means you're spending 10 minutes with each patient if you're seeing 6 an hour. This isn't good. This is not. Well, wait a minute. I mean, there are some patients. I just had this conversation with somebody I know the other day. So you can see some patients for a routine check, quick check, couple 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes if they didn't have a lot of questions and everything's going well and the like. But there are some patients that come to see you that it's going to be 20, 30 minutes.
I predict in my, Orwellian dystopia future that is a possibility that I'm saying within 20 years, most medical doctors, unless you're like a super specialist, like you're a super good surgeon like you were, you have some super speciality, they're not going to exist. What's going to happen is because there's so much information, it's all going to be computer generated.
Yep.
You're going to walk into a room.
Right.
There's going to be scanning equipment there that's going to do a CT scan or an X-ray or something to your body. You're going to stick your finger in a little hole. They're going to prick your finger. They're going to analyze your blood. And then the computer's going to you're going to tell them 5 or 6 of your symptoms. You're going to type them into a keyboard. Then the computer's going to spit out pharmaceuticals with instructions for how to take it. And that's going to be the long and the short of it.
Mm-hmm. I can't argue with you, Pete. I mean, you see it going there.
You can't. How much information can you possibly get to make to come up with a treatment program in 6 minutes? You can't do it.
Right, you can't do it. And this is why we get grief for what we do here, right? Because
Correct.
We talk about empowerment, every person's health, empowerment of their health care, right? This is what we speak about, and we have for years. So on this particular issue, so people say, so it's okay for me to have salt. So what does that mean? Does that mean that I just put a salt shaker in my pocket and wherever I go, I just I think I need a little more. Or is that part of it? Is there another part of this where there are things that entities that you can consume that are beneficial in this regard from a salt intake, sodium chloride standpoint, a calcium standpoint?
Well, your body has wisdom. This is Naturopathy 101. Your body knows what's best given all things being equal. So the first thing to do, entering back into the zone of salt is okay,
mm-hmm.
just start salting your food so that it tastes good.
Mm-hmm.
And your body will let you know when you've used too much salt. And most people who've been on a salt-restricted diet,
mm-hmm.
and most people who've been on a salt-restricted diet haven't just been on a salt-restricted diet for a couple of months. They've been in a salt-restricted diet for a couple of decades.
Right.
Right. So when people figure it out and they start using salt on purpose, often what happens, it's like those old pumps in the farmyard, those hand water pumps. You had to prime the pump with a little bit of water first.
Mm-hmm.
give it a couple pumps, and then the water started coming out. Well, same thing. So when people consciously start salting their food, usually what happens is for 3 or 4 days, maybe a week max, depending, they start craving salt like nobody's business.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can't get enough salt
Mm-hmm.
because the body's going, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's salt time again. I don't know what happened, but here comes the salt. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
People are running on salt fumes. No kidding. So start salting your food so that your food tastes good. Don't be surprised if your appetite for salt increases
Mm-hmm.
in the first week or so that you're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And then just pay attention to your body. Salt your food till it tastes good and then stop. Your body will let you know when the food's too salty.
Mm-hmm.
And the salt that we recommend, there is a difference from salt to salt. My favorite is real salt from the Great Salt Lake in Utah. It's got a lot of minerals in it.
Mm-hmm.
People that are following our advice are taking minerals anyway, so it's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my favorite. And also, if you don't have access to that or can't find it, Celtic salt or Himalayan salt are good options. But, notwithstanding that, if you're out at a restaurant, don't ask them for Celtic salt because they probably won't have it. Just use the salt that's on the table.
Right.
But when you're at home, get the good stuff and salt your food so that it tastes good. Number one. Number two. And again, this is all such common sense. Like an idiot, last week, I thought it would be a good idea for me to undertake a landscaping project in my backyard.
And the wall won.
And the wall won.
Yeah.
I thought I could build a retaining wall. Guess what? I can't. That's young man's work.
Yeah.
Masonry is young man's work.
Yeah.
I have not perspired as much last week as I did probably in the last 10 years combined.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't help that it was 91 degrees and 90% humidity either. But my point here is when you perspire, and this is the time of the year when people perspire more in the northern hemisphere because you're outside and you're sweating more because it's hot and humid. So what happens when you sweat? What do you sweat? Just water? I don't think so. You sweat water and salt and minerals. It all comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So your need for salt increases in the summer,
right?
Because you're sweating more, right?
Right.
So, and remember, this is all about holistic nutrition. It's not just salt that we need. There's 90 essential nutrients that we need, and they all work like an orchestra. 60 of those 90 are minerals. And in the wonderful world of salt, in the human body, there's an intimate relationship between salt and calcium for stomach acid health. You got to have both. Because even if you have adequate amounts of salt and now you've got enough chloride and your body makes hydrochloric acid, it keeps it in the chief cells. There's a type of cell in the stomach called a chief cell. And the chief cell's job is to squirt hydrochloric acid into the stomach when the stomach needs it. But in order to do that, the chief cell needs calcium. So even if you've got enough salt, but you're calcium deficient, it's not going to work. You're still going to have weak stomach acid because your body's got the hydrochloric acid, but it can't get it into the stomach. So, and again, this holistic understanding is really brings us right into the Goldilocks zone, right into the sweet spot. And that's why people who follow our advice have remarkable outcomes most of the time because, well, again, it's not rocket science. The body knows what's best. We just give the body everything that it needs. So salt your food so that it tastes good. And during the summer months, or if you're feeling a little heartburny, you feel a little acid indigestion, you feel like something's just not right down there, which frequently happens more in the summer, interestingly enough, double down on your calcium for Beyond Osteo effects, which, by the way, is not a bad idea as a little in-house experiment to do anyway. Because our whole thing is that everything, it comes right back to nutrient deficiencies.
Right.
All roads lead to nutrient deficiencies.
And that's where the foundation pack kicks in.
100%.
Now, educate our listeners, those not familiar. Foundation pack. So when I went on the foundation pack, which is the 90 essential nutrients, here's one of the things I noticed. I noticed a lot of different things. One of the things I noticed, and maybe this is just me, but prior to me going on the foundation pack, as it relates to salt, I would salt food a bit. Okay? Not a ton, but some. After I was on the foundation pack for, I would say, a month or so, I noticed I wasn't grabbing for the salt shaker. Now, was that a direct result of what I was getting in the foundation pack?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Because remember, it's like a big symphony.
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of biochemical pathways, each of which affects the other and then has another effect and then tertiary effect, and it's unimaginable, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So we rely on the wisdom of the body.
Mm-hmm.
We understand the body knows how to fix itself, wants to fix itself, trying to fix itself, so we give it what it needs. Eliminate food that's gumming up the works.
Right. That's the 12 bad foods. That video's on our website, operationfreedomhealth.com, free, top of the page. Keep going, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Salt your food so that it tastes good, and Bob's your uncle. I mean, that's it. And because everybody's been deficient for so long, and there's no blood work, there's no diagnostic discovery, there's no hair analysis that we can do to let anybody know exactly how much of this stuff you need to take on a daily basis, because there's so many variables. My advice is do the foundation pack for 1 month, and then the next month double the calcium.
And the calcium is part of the foundation pack.
Yep.
The OsteoFX.
OsteoFX. Just get one extra, get the foundation pack and one extra bottle of the calcium for month number 2. So you'd be taking twice as much calcium as you were the month before. See how you feel.
Right.
And then the next month, get twice as much plant-derived minerals. Take that for 30 days. See how you feel. And, you know, if this was a free and fair and just system and we actually did have a free medical marketplace, all of this research would have been done decades ago. And I would be able to take your blood, put it on a machine, and tell you exactly how much you need. But we're not even close to being there because, again, this whole medical nutrition thing is diametrically opposed to the pharmaceutical method. It's antagonistic to the pharmaceutical method. It's antagonistic to it. So, and since the pharmaceutical industry runs the show, this research is not going to be done. Well, you know, for a while. Maybe if we get some billionaire to see the light and he recovers from cancer under our care, then maybe we can start to move the needle with something like this. But in the meantime, we're on our own, folks.
Right.
We are on our own. You got to start experimenting, because as God is my witness, there's one thing I do know. One thing I do know. Well, two things. Don't start a ground war in Southeast Asia. And the second thing
don't build a wall. That's 2.
Don't build a cement wall.
Right.
And your body needs nutrients.
Right.
Your body will respond to nutrients. So experiment and see how you feel. You don't know what you're missing.
Well, and this, you know what, and that's right. You don't know what you're missing. And you don't, and I can attest to this because I found this myself. And I hear about every day from somebody who started on the foundation pack. They go, you know, one of my big problems was I had these cravings in between meals. And I was on the foundation pack for a period of time, and I realized I didn't have these cravings anymore. Yeah. And I wasn't, you know, and I just realized, you know, and that's because as they get the foundation pack on board, and because of the bioavailability of it, they're absorbing the nutrients, and their body's not telling them, hey, even though you just had lunch an hour ago, hey, no, we're good now, we're okay. We don't, you know,
the secret to weight loss that not even Oprah knows
is what?
And veterinarians knew it a long time ago, because there's a phenomenon that happens in farm animals called cribbing. When an animal starts cribbing, it eats stuff that it shouldn't eat. It'll eat the wood on the fence.
Yeah.
It'll eat dirt.
Yeah.
It'll eat stones. It'll eat anything because it's craving nutrients. Why is it craving nutrients? Because the farmer stopped putting minerals in the animal's food.
Right.
So, and it's ironic. I had a segue into Oprah's world years and years ago through her husband, Stedman. Had long conversations with Stedman, told him all about this, lined it all up, and it was like whispering into a hurricane. Apparently, what are you gonna do?
A globalist hurricane.
There you go, globalist hurricane.
A globalist hurricane. That's what you were doing. You were whispering, right?
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do? I mean, all we can do is tell people the truth,
educate,
keep moving this ball forward.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because we're not going to help everybody, man, but not everybody got on Noah's Ark either.
Very true.
Right?
So, Pete, folks can get more information. OperationFreedomHealth.com. The products, the Foundation Pack, the OsteoFX are there as well for them. The videos, the 12 Bad Foods to Eat there. We have information as well at DaveJanda.com. And you have a website, Dr. Glidden, Glidden, drglidden.com. Educate our listeners on what they can find there.
All kinds of information, written information and video information that will help usher you into the undiscovered country of self-help health recovery. And all this information at drglidden.com is available by way of a subscription. And one of the perks you get as a subscriber is 2 hours a week of live chat with me. And last week we had someone from Barbados, and we had someone from Australia, had a bunch of people from Canada. We had somebody from Chechnya. We had someone from Ireland, and all across the United States. People hanging out in the chat room, talking amongst themselves with like-minded individuals and asking Dr. Glidden questions. It's great. It's a wonderful community. It's a really great experience. Again, you don't know what you're missing here because there's a lot more people in the world that are leaning in this direction.
That's right.
Than you think.
And that's because they've realized, wait a minute, what I've been told is really propaganda.
Yeah.
And it's not working. That's why. That's why, Pete.
Truth has a ring to it.
Right. That's right.
Right? It's like the fella said, when you experience the truth, you're in its velvet grasp forever. So this is not the only way forward, but this is a very good way forward. It's science-based, clinically verified, holistic. It's fantastic, but most people don't know about it.
No.
So you want to know about it?
There you go.
Go to drglidden.com and inform yourself about it. I've got information on this website that'll save your life. No kidding.
I thank you, Pete, for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. And, folks, the names of the books. Everybody is Sick and I Know Why. An Attempt to Cure with Holistic Medicine. drglidden.com. OperationFreedomHealth.com. The products we discussed are there as well, along with the videos. I thank you for your time today, Peter, and I thank you, folks, for your time. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Be safe out there.